Hi.
Guy of the
I'm in
Glass
this
Virus
community.
think tank, the heart of everything there, of a platform that is about educational strategies. Because of there's no option of the pandemic to organize it physically, they developed a new format. So I think we're very happy for that, Jens, and I take my chance to thank a few people in that. Jens, as a first person, thanks. Bert Willems, he's also somewhere around. Marie de Bruin is somewhere. Judith is hiding herself. Gail, Matthias, Caroline Madden, and Erin Ehrlich. Thanks a lot. It's sort of the active board, I call it, of the Glass Virus. And thanks to them, we are here. Thanks a lot. We will organize these every last Wednesday for the upcoming 5 months. We are gonna invite young artists and experts on specific themes. And I want to go very quickly, give you a brief summary about the topics that are upcoming. In November, the topic will be around culture and inclusivity. In December, we talk about the writing as a way of making. The next month, January, we focus on performativity and materialism. And the last seminar is the new work, new audience. That's in February 2021. If you want to have some more information about all these other seminaries, you can go to the website www.glassvirus.com. Our topic for today is making art in pandemic time. We invited for that Jesse Magee, Laura Quinn, and Linda da Costa. You see them. I think you just see the 4 of us. We invited Jesse Magee as an expert. We invited, and also as a professor in that role, and as an artist. We invited Laura Quinn also as a professor and teacher and as an artist. And we invited Linda da Costa as a just graduated student at the Rietveld Academy, and of course, as a young artist. In this seminary, we have some questions in mind for this talk. Questions like, what are the consequences for the artist in glass studios and in this shrinking economy? How did this lockdown have an impact on the operation of the glass studios? And which sort of alternatives have been developed? How did students experience the lockdown? And how did the pandemic maybe affect their work? I think we can ask that to Linda later on. What's the impact of the limit social contexts for an artist? The exhibition were closed to museum and galleries. I think that's or more or less or some topic for Jesse and Laura. And in what way does this affect the practice of the artist? So we will talk on these topics later on, but first of all, I think it's useful that we have a short introduction of you guys, so people know who you are, what your practice is, and so on and so on. So Jesse, maybe you can start with a short introduction.
My name is Jesse Magee. I was born in the United States, grew up there, studied at Alpha University for a couple of years before coming to Germany in 2001 and continuing my studies at the Institute of Ceramic and Glass Art in Hergenshausen, Germany, where I got my master's. I was the first glass student at that academy, so kind of grew up with the studio and built up the studio at the same time. My work is conceptual in that I start with an idea and look for the strongest way to express it. I'm just going to flip through some slides really quick because we don't have a lot of time. These are just some traps that I started building. A lot of my work has to do with human condition and vulnerability. So I think you can see the vulnerability aspect in some works like this, but also in works like this that is vitrified earth, nothing else, just dirt. Each 1 ton of dirt fired to 1200 degrees, and it's somewhere between ceramics and glass, I suppose, but it's, you know, it's just what it is. It's dirt. Or works like this. So vulnerability, and work with a lot of glass and natural materials. Just want to show really quick my school, because that's half of what I do. I teach at the Institute of Ceramic and Glass Art since 2011. I run the studio there, the glass studio there, and I teach art and a bunch of different subjects. This is where it is, in Germany. We have a fully equipped glass studios, and I teach glass blowing here. Some people might know this guy. This is Mark Beretta. Invite him over once in a while to do some big work with us. And we offer all of our students access to as many possibilities of glass working as possible. But we don't really force them to do any of it, and we don't really force them to do anything in particular. So they also develop in their own way, and the art develops in its own way, making every individual student very different from the next. And hopefully nothing to do with what we as teachers make, but really just about what they make. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. I think it's clear. Laura, maybe we can listen to your presentation.
Okay, hopefully you should be able to see my screen. So hello everybody, thanks for coming online, and big thanks as well to the Glass Virus for inviting me to be part of this today. I'll just give you a little bit of background about me. I've been glassmaking since 2011, and I completed my BA in glass design from the National College of Art and Design in Dublin in 2015, and since then I've worked in the Corning Museum of Glass and in Ilse Glass Studio in Estonia, and then I finally came to the UK to work as a glass blowing assistant. Since then I've kind of participated in lots of different exhibitions, including kind of most recently the Ireland Glass Biennale and the Craft Council here, their show Collect, which happened literally just before lockdown in London. Oh. So just to give you a bit of background about the type of work I make, this was one of my BA pieces that I showed in 2015 when I finished my first degree. And it was really the start of my kind of exploration in combining glass with other materials to make larger, stronger, more durable forms. And this piece, believe it or not, is a wearable piece. So it really kind of started my line of inquiry of how glass combines with other materials. When I started my master's studies, I got a chance to actually collaborate with some outside artists. So this is a lighting piece that I collaborated on with an American blacksmith. This is a sculpted aluminium and glass blown over it. So it became really apparent to me during my master's actually that collaboration was a huge part of how the development of my work was informed. I like to combine computer-aided design and digital technologies with traditional glassmaking to make my practice more sustainable. So for instance, that can even come down to just making realistic renders of designed objects for my clients, so they've got a good idea of what it's going to look like before it enters the gas guzzling stage of the production. It also is a really great opportunity to make 3D prints to prototype, and also 3D prints to take glass blowing molds from. So that's the result of those CAD design pieces. And I use other techniques such as laser cutting and water jet cutting with alternative materials such as rubber and leather. This one here is lampwork glass and laser cut rubber. This is lampwork glass and water jet cut silicone. And then to something that we kind of circle back around, I'm just going to show you a few slides about some things that I got up to during lockdown, including presenting from my garage at the International Glass Art Society conference, which very quickly went from being a real life planned event in Sweden to going completely online. So we'll be able to kind of circle around on that again and what the consequences of that was. I also started my job as the glass technical tutor in the University for the Creative Arts in the UK, right at the beginning of lockdown here. So I had to start my job teaching from my kitchen table, and it kind of quickly became apparent that actually both staff and students really were missing that hands-on, knowledge share with the material and with the process. So it beyond just kind of tutorials on online platforms, it became really apparent that we needed to allow the students to keep making at home in some way or another. So this is where I developed a series of videos called Home Glass Hacks, which allows students to work with glass at home with items from around the house, such as tea light candles, creme brulee torches, wet and dry sandpaper. And this allowed them really to actually build up some material knowledge and keep that tacit knowledge building up before they enter back into the workshops. I'll come back to that video later as well when we have more time. So even like giving them an introduction to lamp working to see if they even like it before, say, investing in the equipment, I showed them how to lamp work with just a normal creme brulee torch. This quickly led on actually to inviting them to make words that were a communication of how they felt during lockdown, which has quickly developed into a bigger project where I've asked people from around the world, glass artists and non-glass artists alike, to use a candle to bend a glass stringer to make a word that's reflective of their time in isolation. And I've been collecting these words. They've been posted into me, and they're now in 2 exhibitions at the moment, one in Ireland and one in England, and it's due to go to Tacoma in 2022 for the GAS conference there. So this is a real just show of how people have been going through this time in lockdown. And to be honest, it's been quite a good survey actually of how people have been feeling. But the best part is that it's open to anybody, so it's completely inclusive. There's submissions from scientists, butchers, chefs, you name it. All sorts have submitted words and bent glass and posted them onto me. So this is the exhibition it's in now, which is in Kilkenny. And it's a sculpture trail, which we can talk about later, as well as an alternative way for exhibitions to continue in a kind of COVID secure environment, which is outdoors. And the link of just how to get involved, which I can tell you more about again when we've more time.
Yeah.
Me.
Thank you, Laura. That's it's perfect. We'll jump into your story later on and dig in more and deeper in that. But first, I think it's nice to hear something about Linda. Can you give a short presentation about what you did in your graduation show, maybe, or what your work is about?
Sure. Also, thanks for inviting me for this seminar. So my name is Linda Costa, and I was born in Luxembourg. I'm currently living in Amsterdam since 2014, and I just graduated this year with a Bachelor in Fine Arts and Design at the Rietveld Academy. So in my first year of glass department, I was busy with alchemy, an ancient, also esoteric practice where alchemists were trying to purify, mature, and perfect certain materials. That's when I got inspired to look into the alchemy of glass and got fascinated how the material's natural composition and transparency has inspired philosophers and other thinkers to find explanations, but also theories on the unique properties of glass. I was interested to read that the process of perfecting a material has led humans to reflect and philosophize on their unique capacities, and also questioning why we were able to create something like this. When I was working in my studio, I like to shift my focus from the human experience of things to also the things themselves, where I trust the performativity of others in events, especially where glass blowing, where glass is such a dominant material. I had to first learn on how to respond to it in order to be attuned with it. And this scheme of circular interaction has inspired my practice, where I create visual content that reflects on the vitality of material, but also on the human collaborations of my process, where I also allow myself to be attuned to another state and back to myself in a new way. So on my PDF, you can see works that I made in the first year, and also if you can go back on the first page, These are screenshots of a video I made where I collaged found footages with 3D models that I made myself. There isn't a linear story to it, but it expresses rather a certain kind of intensity while watching. And here I was basically busy thinking about materiality, transformation, and also the human body. Then to the next page, you can see more footages. On the slide number 3, the next slide, you can see 2 acrylic paintings that were inspired by the word sublime. Basically, I tried to think of a situation where I would experience the sublime, and that's when watching the sunset. And here I tried to represent it, to represent that emotion in form of vessels. Then on the slide 4, it's the same idea, but then with oil paintings, and I kind of like how you can achieve a certain kind of transparency with adding oil. And then on the next slide, I made these following works during the quarantine. Since Corona hit the academy, I had no studio, no workshop, no people, and little process I wanted to work on. So I went back to the things that were fun to make, and I made these virtual sculptures that were inspired by the paintings I made in the first years. This is something I wasn't planning at all to do in my last year of graduation. But I had long thought about making these paintings physically real, but there were some complications because some shapes are a little bit complicated. So that's why I like the idea that virtually there is no limit, and you can make shapes that are kind of impossible to realize physically. And somehow with this new tool, I expressed it in new form, where it is possible to make it, but it stays an imaginary sculpture. So you can just go on and see some of the virtual glass pieces I made. Yeah. And then on the next slides, these are like pictures of the graduation show. So it felt somehow wrong to make an exhibition where I showcased my sculptures, especially in a time where I was questioning a lot about what I was doing and why I was doing it. I just then honestly made a collection of things with perhaps an interesting balance of anxiety and urgency. And then I just decided to give homage to the materials, processes, collaborations, memories I had during this year. And then I worked on it in a more exhibitional context.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Linda. Maybe this is, I thought it's maybe a good link to jump on the question about how you experienced your graduating year, because you were the graduating student, you needed to put up a show. How did it affect your work? Maybe you can react on that, and I jump to Jesse. Maybe you can take over on that.
So I was researching a lot the first months before the corona. And then when the corona hit was basically when I had to start making work. So it was actually very heartbreaking. And I had also in some ways, because my whole process was about working in a workshop and being with the people, I somehow had a hard time to work during the quarantine. But also I have to say it gave me a lot of time to process and to think about what I've been researching on, because the graduation year is such a intense year and it goes so fast. So in some ways it was also fruitful for me, not in a more in a physical way, but in a more reflective way. Yeah, and I had to come up with a new idea, but somehow since I made this sculptures that I didn't really use for my show, it was more of a way to keep on going. But yeah, I somehow thought it was actually a very interesting situation to be in, and also to reflect on my practice later on and what it can actually be after this pandemic. So it was a very overwhelming and emotional process, I have to say. And I'm also very,
I mean,
very surprised how the outcome came.
just a question: did the studio reopen so you can make these glass works at the end, or were they made before?
So actually, we had a big privilege. At the end, the studio opened, but just for graduates. So in some way, it was better because we had like a full attention from our assistant. She could just just like concentrate on us
Right?
because we were just two people in the graduation. And yeah, it was weird because we were using the studio and there was nobody around. I also kind of like this intensity of having people around and this stress, but there was no stress, and also not such a, yeah, there was no excitement, let's say, in some ways, about deadlines or graduation, or that there is no space in the workshop anymore because everybody is using it. It was somehow like a very calm process as soon as the studio opened, because we had also a lot of time to think about what to do. So as soon as we got into the studio, everything was kind of like set and planned.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, you were saying that your studio closed down completely. Is that right?
Yeah, for a few months. Yeah, like we didn't really know also during the quarantine if there would be a graduation show. So I think like really at the end of June or July, we just got to know that there will be a graduation, which also like was always like changing my plans, because you don't know if you're gonna make a physical show or if it's going to be virtual. So there were a lot of things to adapt on and think about, and nobody really knew what's gonna happen.
Laura, what is with your studio? Did yours ever open back up again at the school?
Not in time for the graduating years, and I guess to reflect that as well, there, I guess, like module guidelines changed. So what was set out by the academic staff, they shifted the goalposts. So rather than having to have a physical output from the year, they could have a digital output instead. So we only reopened, I think it was maybe June or late June, early July, and that was just staff. So we only had our very first students in again last week. So it's been a long time. And I think actually coming to that conclusion that we weren't going to be reopening, I suppose, making a definite answer instead of the we might, we don't know. I think coming to a definite answer helped our students to just actually come to terms with it and really get stuck in to the digital side of things and into their digital submission, and not, I guess, more in the fact that they won't be producing physical work. So it was a really big shift for them, but yeah.
But you were also saying that you did some online tutorials to help them do some stuff at home.
Yeah, definitely. I think, even though these online tutorials weren't ever intended to allow them to produce work for a degree show, the whole point of it was to actually just allow them to continue to build up material and process knowledge. I think with, a lot of the courses that have gone online the last while, you know, craft and anything that's material based, there's only so much tutorials you can have until you, I think, need to get your hands back on the material in order to feed that conversation. So even though it was very lo-fi in terms of its making methods, it was quite good, I think, to see the students embrace it, and also maybe realize that actually they don't need access to high-tech energy guzzling equipment in order to make work that counts and work that's, I guess, reflective of the ideas that they've been producing in their notebooks.
I don't know, you can jump again your presentation to the pictures or maybe to a video, because I saw some examples in front, and I think it's very interesting to see how basic how the tutorials were, and with basic materials, and like really with candles, like, so everyone has it in their own home or studio or sleeping room. Yeah, maybe you can you give us some more information about that?
Sure. So I'll just hop back to this slide first, that kind of, I think, illustrates that point. It's, you know, it's never going to be the same as in a fully equipped studio, but all of these like at-home techniques, I think, gave a baseline knowledge, especially say for first years who may have started off with kiln formed glass but not have come into the cold shop yet. Because I only started this job this year, it was really great because I got to actually approach the students completely fresh, and, you know, give them the information from, I guess, the method I wanted. So to actually, you know, think back to when I was learning how to cold work, the big eureka moment with cold working was just actually learning about the grit sizes and learning why you need to go through the grit sizes. So teaching them how to hot pop a sauce jar and then grind down the rim using wet and dry sandpaper, which is silicon carbide, you know, which is what we use in the cold shop, and bring it through from a really rough grit right up until a high polish, which is 3000 grit. And things like bending glass with a candle, and looking at actually, well, even though they're not using the equipment they would in the studio, it kind of preloads, I think, the student with an idea of the process, a little bit of that tacit knowledge, but I think most importantly, it takes out the fear, so that when they were ready to come back, which is only last week, they already have an idea of what to expect and already have an idea of how the material should feel at different stages. So hopefully this will play okay. So this is just using, you know, a little chef's torch from eBay, like for £10. And this is a technique I learned when I did a masterclass in Corning under Daphne Kaufman. She specializes in this kind of connection method and makes the most spectacular, like, botanical structures. So it's just kind of showing that you don't need hi-fi equipment to get a feel for the process. And especially for maybe students who may not have access to lamp working because we don't have it in our facilities, it's for them to get an idea before they maybe invest in the equipment or invest in hiring an external studio, that they can see, well, is this for me? And just get an idea of what it's like to actually work with a flame and work with rods. And then was there a slide after? And that's what was produced out of that torch. So I think that kind of really maybe shows the fact that it's just really lo-fi equipment. You know, it's a candle used to bend these stringers, and particularly this project, I think the students really came on board with. But then outside of that, I just posted it up online, and suddenly I think a lot of people outside of the glass world saw their opportunity to actually be involved in glass because it used a candle, and everyone has candles. So I think making that jump from what we're used to, I personally feel, has opened up the accessibility of what we do and the way that we communicate it you know, to the outside audience.
Yeah, it's a beautiful project, and I also need to think on it's in the exhibition now on 2 spots. Also that the organized the exhibitions in that period. Did you do it with the students, with all the participants? How did you do it? How difficult was it? Is it still open? There were a lot of cancellations of museum, of galleries, and so on and so on. People, some people worked for more than 1 year to their solo show, and then there's a cancel. I don't know which experience you have.
I'll share my screen again just to show you some images about that. Ooh, there we go. Yeah, so I actually got the opportunity basically I had everyone who made a word posted to me to my address here, and this is the working list of participants, but it's growing every day. I have people saying that they're taking part and sending glass words to me.
And you produce them.
Say again?
You produce them, the words.
No,
they make it and they send the word to you. Okay.
Yeah, and then for, say, some folks who maybe felt that they didn't quite have the dexterity to do it, you know, for whatever reason, arthritis, I made some on their behalf, but they submitted the word to me. But most of the words are made directly by people who've never touched glass before, which I think is, you know, brilliant. But so when I put it up online, I got contacted by the Design and Crafts Council in Ireland, and the Design and Craft Gallery, who are based in Kilkenny, which is where the kind of HQ is. And they put together this exhibition during lockdown because they saw that actually this is a real chance for us to, you know, have an outdoor sculpture trail where it's a bit safer in the open air, and have people submit work that's reflective, I guess, of what we've all been going through and how we're all connected at this time. I'll show you what this looked like. So this was my some of the words that went in here. So this is only half of the words, and since this got installed, the amount of participants doubled. And this is where it is in Kilkenny. It's in the town centre, walking into a shopping centre, and it's just in what would normally have posters in it. And people also, there's a little post box beside it, so people can put in a suggested word if they want to suggest a word to be made by an artist, or they can take down the details and email me, and I give them the information about how to make the words themselves. So it's a constantly growing project. But I think what's interesting about this is that actually during the period of this being on, Ireland has gone through several different stages of lockdown. When it started, we were, you know, travel was allowed country-wise. Then only, I think last Friday, Ireland has gone down to a 5-kilometre radius from your house. So the audience for this sculpture trail has gone from, it could be a national audience to actually the residents from this town. And I don't know about the rest of the audience here, but I definitely found during strict lockdown, the thing that kept me sane was going out for walks and just exploring my local area, and actually taking the time to take in my local area and see things I'd never seen before. So the fact that actually the locals can, within their 5-kilometre radius, do their exercise loop and take in the sculpture trail, I think is really amazing.
I think this project's interesting in many ways, just about how it goes back to the basics. I think in a lot of ways, especially in glass, we become so technically proficient. Everything works, and there's so many producers of so much different equipment. And we, if you look back at the 70s, when it all started, people were always constantly doing everything themselves. And many of these people then became producers of specialized equipment because they sort of fell in love with that process too. And what you're doing there sort of brings us back to that. But not only that, in terms of how you're showing it in these off spaces, making it accessible, making it about the public or about people in general, bringing people into the art situation as makers that they didn't know they were artists, and other people seeing shows and that would normally not go to galleries. also bring the art sort of back to the basics, where we've also become so so strict about how you can progress upwards and all these kinds of things. The art community or the art world is so difficult. Everybody complains about how back in the 80s it was so much easier to have access to certain spaces. And so this, and these kind of projects, you're seeing opportunities and creating accessibility to different people, which is interesting. I wanted to jump to Linda though. You were talking about collaboration and in terms of the change also. I mean, now we're sort of heading toward a lockdown again, at least here in Germany, and in Holland, I believe as well. How do you think that's going to change your work when you can't collaborate? You have to social distance, you're going to be more dealing with yourself again. Do you see the opportunities there, or how do you approach that?
I mean, all these changes are kind of challenging, and it is actually a good way to adapt and find maybe new insights, maybe new collaborations with maybe non-human material, and I mean, it really also gave me this opportunity to find a new way to reconnect with things, like you just said, to go maybe back to the basics, or to find a new way to express my work. I mean, it is kind of a privilege to be creative in such a time where there are a lot of people struggling. And I mean, I think it is a challenge, but it's worth taking it. And now, like, I'm just starting my life as an artist, which is in such a in such a weird moment. Also, a bit for me, it's a bit of an unstable situation on how to move on, how to represent myself in a society where we are trying to redefine ourselves. So yeah, I think there are a lot of questions that are open but not solved yet, and for me it's just basically a good way to find maybe new answers, and new collaborations.
You are working in Amsterdam, Linda. I'm just curious, like your friends, the young artists, did you saw some exciting ways of showing their work? Did you have some examples of that you can share with us?
I actually haven't seen much work. I've been like being in touch with my friends that also graduated, and we kind of are a little bit, like I said, in this unstable moment. I'm actually very like interested in making like exhibitions with the people that I'm very like close to, and maybe make like also work that where I honestly know the person and can collaborate with it. But I didn't have so much time to look into new forms of work, since I also shared my uncertainties with others. I kind of also can feel that it is somehow hard to find to directly find an answer to this, because it is changing all the time. So yeah, I haven't had the opportunity yet.
Thank you. I promised people to jump in also when they put some questions into the chat box. So I will, Laura, there's a question for you. How did the participants get the glass strips of your project, and did you limit the participants of the use a colorful or just a colorless glass? Can you give them some more information?
Yeah, so when this project started, and again, it kind of started quite organically, I considered buying all of these, so they're called stringers, in and then shipping them out around the world. And I just thought that's like logistically a nightmare. So in the end, I thought what was the simplest thing to do it was to actually just put a web page together. So it's on my website, that explains absolutely like step by step how to go through it. So one of the parts of that was where to buy your stringers, and they're quite cheap because you don't need many and they're so small, and a few different companies do them. But I did limit it to colorless glass, and I guess the reason for that was because it's a unity. There's a lot of like, I think, scope for creative expression in the words that you're making, but what this project for me represented was that it almost was like a cluster or a flurry of all the words we've been connecting to each other with, and having that in almost like a clear kind of display, where you couldn't maybe pick out everything exactly, but the shadows cast by it became more apparent than the glass words themselves. I thought would be an interesting commentary on the words that we say text to each other on Instagram or Facebook that we throw away and maybe never garnered the respect that they now actually deserve, that have connected our community. So that's why I stuck with the colorless glass, and visually also, but I think both conceptually and visually, it was the right reason to stick to colorless glass. But people were open to, if they happened to be in hot shops working still. I know a few people were, they pulled their own glass stringers, and some other people who were lamp workers said they had borosilicate or soft glass. So it didn't matter what type of glass was used, as long as it was a clear glass and it was thin enough that they were able to bend it on a flame. But it is worth noting that the project is ongoing, and will be for as long as we're in isolation. So it's as long as coronavirus is around. So you're all very welcome to take part in it.
Maybe we'll give the link to your website where everything is explained on that. Maybe we can jump on also another question, like what is the impact of the limitation of the social contacts because of the pandemic? Of course, you give some solutions to work from home, but there are a lot of people. Maybe Jesse, I jump to you on that. You were running the glass studio, the glass blowing, the big pipes, and so on and so on. How were your students reacting on that, and your students, but also yourself? What about your practice?
Well, I was very lucky in the pandemic. I was very lucky in the pandemic because I have my own studio and I also had access to the school, even though our furnace wasn't on. So I had actually a lot of access to studios to work. We closed down the studio last year for students, and we gave them lots of things to do from home. Mm-hmm. Our school offers a lot of materials for free, so that students really have access to everything all the time in normal years. And last semester, they really had access to very, very little, or just the things that they could buy themselves. And we weren't sure how that was going, but it turned out for us and the students, many projects developed out of this not having this equipment, not having all the possibilities. They developed projects that they probably would not have developed in a normal semester. Some of them very, very good that I'm sure that they're going to continue making even when they get back. I mean, we are now back since the beginning of October. We're back in the studio with a scheduled system so that we don't have too many people in the studio, only 4 students in the studio at the same time. So we have to navigate all of that. We're going to have, our furnace is up and running, so we're probably going to be blowing glass next week. And we went through and got 1 pipe for each student, so they will have their own pipe, and they have to clean the pipe and only blow into their own pipes. And hope that works. Mm-hmm. And we'll see. But I've experienced the pandemic similar, but maybe different to Laura, in that a lot of people have been seeing opportunities in different ways. Many people in my community have been getting access to exhibition spaces they would normally not have access to, because they just went and asked. They just said, hey, you don't have a show now, can I show? And the people were like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Just so that there's a show. So I've experienced that if you're willing to hustle, you can get stuff done in a way that just wasn't possible before. So Linda, also maybe for you, thinking about how to go forward after your graduation, there are possibilities for young artists artists now that might not have been there a year ago, just in how to show your art. Even if you just want to take it to a space that's empty and they say, well, we can't open for public. You say, okay, well, let me install. Just let me put my work up and we can take amazing pictures. Often I find the pictures that remain after show are even more important sometimes than the visitors. Sometimes we have very few visitors, but amazing photos. And when you have those later for application, people are like, wow, you showed there, that's amazing. And it's just the quality of the photo can be made through a space. So there's spaces empty, try to use them maybe. Go out and, you know, just see what's available in any way. But of course, yeah, community's been down, not been able to travel. A lot of things been canceled. Shows have been canceled. I organize residencies, and a lot of those we had to cancel. Only been able to do one of them so far in the summer, with lots of windows open. But you know, we look for opportunities. I look for opportunities, and we hope we can keep our studios open here so that students can keep having some access again. I also see though students work more efficiently because they have less time. And so we'll see, you know, that work ethic that you find, oh, I have one slot and I have 1 4-hour slot and I got to get it done. And be less drinking coffee and more really getting the thing done. So that's something to learn too.
Yeah. But Laura, you were also talking about the collaboration. That's a huge part of your practice. How are you now handling with it as an artist? Not as the role of the professor and what you did on that part, but the collaboration stuff. It's for a lot of people who are working with glass a huge part of their practice. So maybe you also can talk about the feeling around it, because there's a lot of solitude. How we handle with that part. It's for a lot of artists very difficult.
For sure, yeah. Could I maybe jump back to the slide of the collaborative work just to give a bit of reference for what I'll talk about? Like collaboration appears throughout my work in different ways, you know, even from outsourcing 3D printing to outsourcing water jet cutting and all of that, which has been pretty seamless during lockdown, because a lot of the places that I collaborate with are their own businesses and they're one-man bands, so they kept open during lockdown. So I was able to actually have, you know, different materials water jet cut and then posted to me, and I was able to lamp work glass at home with a welding torch. So that was still pretty great to see that. But this was, say for example, a collaboration that I did with, as I said, American blacksmith Daniel Wiedoff. But this project, I think, unbeknownst to myself, set us up quite well, I think, for working in isolation, because this project was an experiment. We both made pieces in our own material, and then we posted them to each other, and the only limit at all was that it could be posted, but we were not to tell each other what we were making, and we weren't to post it on social media. It was in complete secrecy, and this whole project was about our reaction to the objects we received and how we interacted with them. And again, that all had to happen in complete isolation from each other. So this collaborative project actually was a way of viewing what are the principles of collaboration, and how lack of communication with the person, and more so communication with the object and the material that isn't familiar to you, might give you that communication. So I can say that actually, even all this time later, Daniel still hasn't finished his parts because he's contemplating them still. So I have no idea what he produced. So I think collaboration is, you know, extremely important, and we are all very we do lean into it, I think, as glass artists. However, I think this is a really important opportunity to reconsider what are the principles of collaboration. And I think that is like kind of almost what Linda was saying, is that actually collaboration doesn't just mean with other humans, it means with non-humans too. And lockdown and isolation has given us an opportunity, I think, to reform our thoughts on it.
Yeah, Linda, it was very important for you too.
Yeah, somehow it was the core also in my graduation work to reflect on things that I wouldn't have had reflected on if there wasn't a pandemic. Yeah.
It's time, of course, also to reflect and to take some time to think about the projects. Yeah.
I mean, you, Linda, you also said we're very privileged to be able to make art in these tough times where people are fighting with so many different things, fighting for their lives sometimes. I think this is an interesting realization in general in our Western world, where we're really are so privileged when people are hungry other places all the time. And I find that Corona has sort of sharpened the view on these kind of things, realizing how privileged we really are, how good we do in general, how well we live, and there's just the possibilities that are open to us, and maybe we need to think about that and carry that over also when everything opens back up, and not just go back to business as usual. Laura, you said a lot of your work also has to do with sustainability, and this is maybe a good opportunity to think even more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, what I've noticed seeing other studios and artists online talking about is that actually this has given us the opportunity to have a full stop. So especially, I think when you get wrapped up in the production side of your income in your glass work, or you're working towards a submission or an exhibition, there's kind of that like constant, I guess, like conveyor belt of things that keep coming in and you keep having to work towards, and all of a sudden that completely stopped. So it was a great opportunity, I think, for a lot of people to maybe finally actually have the time to make the changes to their practice to make it more sustainable, or even a full stop to have the time to start to think about that. You look at studios that have been going for years and years with equipment that's patched up, and it's kind of on its last legs, but now has been, I think, a good time to do that. And I think for me especially, I've been working towards, when I was doing my master's in Plymouth College of Art, I was working towards how to make my practice more sustainable. But I think, I got to a good point with that, but until the lockdown came, I never really pushed it into that realm of, well, how low energy can I go with it, and what is the output of it, which of course was that Words of Isolation project. And I guess the question came to me was, how much energy do we need to use to make work that matters and conveys our concepts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe also, how much work do we need to make? I find there's expectations of an artist constantly producing and producing and producing. And I think it's good for us to all step back and realize maybe some of this work is not good that we're producing. Maybe produce more precise, and don't saturate everything with the work. If we have to live with it constantly around us, maybe we have a better view of what we really want to be making, and not just making because it's expected of us. I mean, somebody told me that they think that if they don't post something every day on Instagram, people will just assume that they're dead. And I think this has changed a lot of expectations. People realize, okay, sometimes it's good to slow down. Sometimes it's good not to produce something. Now people are not expected to post every week or every day because maybe they just can't produce it at the moment. And I think this reduction of the expectations of what you have to do as an artist is actually probably a good thing.
Yeah, especially for the graduation show, I had all these thoughts about what is expected from me at the end, like if there's gonna be a show in such a limited time. And also during the pandemic, also it was super scary to not know what's coming next, but in the same time it's also so freeing to not have to plan, to not have to think about tomorrow, and just like be present. Yeah.
For sure. I think, yeah, it's interesting because it only really, like, the past few years, I've only started thinking, you know, through degrees and that, the work that I make within it, of shifting that focus of saying, oh, this is work for a submission, or this is work for an exhibition, to thinking, no, this is work for me. But then completely during lockdown, it had to completely be for me. So I think, you know, like how you were saying, Jesse, of how we're privileged, I think we're privileged as well to have creativity. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I definitely found having creativity was one of the main things that kept me going through lockdown. But it wasn't that, you know, producing it for anybody else but myself. And ultimately, that's what it boiled down to. And it, you know, it allowed me to kind of try other techniques that I never really had the time, or the space to do, or maybe the kind of end purpose to do. You know, things like copper foiling and that, which kept me going and kept me having daily projects to do just for myself. So I think it is a really good break and a shift of focus of who are we making the work for.
I want to take a note that Gail is sending us, like she's writing down like the art pauvre movement, the ethics of making in the most immediate way possible. That it's very very relevant and very liberating. I think that's more or less the thing that you were also telling now. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then they're coming in now in the chat. Does the pandemic provoke new and alternative ways of work, contribution and communication in your community? Maybe Jesse, that's something for you.
I started painting.
Mm-hmm.
Never had time for that, to learn how. It was never a focus. But in the community, I don't know. Like I said, the students, I've been doing different things. And I see that other people are just trying different things, moving into also digital. A friend of mine is a painter. She's moving into digital, how to make what she does digitally and project it on space sometimes, because she has a limited amount of space in where she lives. So I think it is changing things, but I don't know exactly how things are changing. I don't know if she will move forward with that. I don't know if painting's any good for me. We'll see. But I think it does give people time to start things that they maybe would not have started. Because if you get into the grind, like Laura was saying, you have to produce, you have this show, and you have this show, and you have this show. And you have the works for those shows, and you have to produce those things. And as soon as that goes away, then you're like, well, I can just produce for me. I can just go into my studio and just be there for the joy of it, which is an amazing feeling. I haven't had that in a really long time, because it's always about production. Figure out how to make the piece, and okay, I need to structure to get that one done and that one done. And I can just sort of see where it takes me, develop new things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Jesse.
No, what about you, Laura? I was going to ask.
Yeah, so I think going back as well to that about contribution and communication in your community, what's been really interesting about the pandemic is that actually it's given me the opportunity to work indirectly with a community I never would have come in contact with, and that's the folks at Hilltop Artists in Tacoma. So Brandy, who I think I saw online from the Glass Art Society, kind of pushed me towards them to actually get them involved in the Words project, and they work with kind of disadvantaged youths from a different multitude of cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds, and I guess give glass to them as a way to develop and communicate. So that's a community that has been now gotten involved with the project that I never ever would have had, you know, the ability to, I think, be involved with before. You know, they're so far away from where I am physically, but virtually they've been able to become a part of it and will be part of the exhibition when it's on in Tacoma.
Mm-hmm. It's more or less giving us the link to some other questions. I try to listen and I try to adapt to all the rest. Since most of you teach in institutes, that's what you guys doing, except Linda. what do you individually think you have taken from working under the pandemic time that can be adopted even after the self-isolation? That's more or less what you start to talk. To directly maybe, and also someone else, but and everyone read the chats, I think so. So maybe I do not need to read everything and throw it into the talk, but there's also some shared lockdown journal about like when people can be together and they search some other ways to find connection, and has some other practices they're getting started up on that way. I'm reading, it's coming here. Bert is asking us, like, there are a lot of, Jesse already talked about it, like the pictures of an exhibition do have a large impact on the career of the artist, social media and so on and so on. But maybe that's a sad evolution. People are not directly experiencing the work anymore and getting used to this kind of looking. The Instagram thing, the websites, the Facebook and so on. Is Corona contributing to this evolution? Or does it make us want to experience it again, like we used to do before, like when we were young, he's writing. What about the physical part of seeing work, touching work? You can't touch it all the time, but maybe Jesse, can you react on that part?
Well, I mean, I try to tend to see the positive side of things, and yes, there's a digital thing. And I mean, I'm a big fan of material, and I like experiencing things directly. But the networking online is a positive thing about it. But also, if there's a limited number of people in a gallery or in a show, and the concentration, you really go to the show to see the art, and not for the social, not for the socialization, not for this networking that we all apparently need to do. But really actually for the artwork, and there are few people in a show, then there's a positive side of that too. Then it became maybe really more about a focus on the artwork itself and not on everything else, not on drinking your wine. Linda, how did you experience your graduation show? You had a show, as I understand?
Yeah, like you just said, actually, it was very different than all the other show. It also was really hard for me to realize that I just graduated, because there wasn't like this party or a social interaction. So we had some small meetings where we just, you know, like made some congratulations, but still now it's still like weird to think that I graduated. But there is this like really good side of it that I realized during the show, because there was such a limited people that could come. There was not like this crowd that was like just hiding the works and people drinking and talking, and it was really, you could really dive into the energy of different rooms and talk to the artists and have this more like casual interaction with the people that you would never have if you had this like festive yeah, energy. No, that was really good in some way.
We also started with a question in the beginning of what are the consequences for artists in their work with glass, but not just artists, general, in this shrinking economy. And I think show your work in exhibition and see it physically is a very important part of it. So in that way, it's nice that you have a sort of one-on-one relation with the work, because there are not 10,000 other people in front with you of the work with a glass of wine. But what about the gallerists? What about the collectors? What about, and so on? It's a very important part to survive for us. If we skip the physical, if the physical part is gone, I think it's infecting a lot of things.
Well, I mean, we have a shrinking economy, but as I saw the numbers of Germany, and we're about back to where we were 3 years ago. we weren't doing bad 3 years ago, you have to say. And this idea that everything needs to constantly be going up, it can't possibly work in long term. So I remain optimistic. Laura, you have your own private practice that you sell. How have you experienced it in numbers? How has that looked out for you in this last month?
It's quite unique. The last few months have been the busiest I've ever been in my entire career. And even commissions wise, I've received my biggest commission in the last few months that I've been able to make at home, which is amazing. But for example, I exhibited at Collect last year in London by the Crafts Council, and it's quite funny hearing you, Jesse, and Linda talk about the whole idea of having wine and that, but actually for the work that I create, which is jewelry and wearable pieces, I need my audience to be a bit merry and break down that fear of glass as a material you can wear. So I need them to actually have the edge taken off in order to really delve into the work. And I also find that actually I need to be there with them with the work to really encourage them to touch it and feel it, because it's an integral part of how I make my work sustainable, is developing that human connection with it. And it's that kind of, I guess, celebratory party atmosphere that I really ended up, actually selling all of my work during Collect last year. And there is, a show that I was due to be part of next year. And recently it was announced that they're changing the way it's going to be shown. So instead of having it in person, it's all going to go online. And the show itself is, it's talking practically here, it's very expensive to be a part of. And I just feel that actually, if I'm not really guaranteed that one-on-one experience with the potential, with the audience, the potential buyer, the potential gallerist, then I can't really be sure of coming back on how much it's cost to get there. So it's a double-edged sword, I think.
I mean, we're looking at probably the Art Cologne will not happen. I can't actually imagine it's going to happen. And of course, friends of mine that were planning to show there, it's tough for them because that's a big art fair, and that's where you make the money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's maybe a good question that we can all ask ourselves now, if what's important about what we make and the fact that we make material objects, if the experience of that is, if it's important that it's in person, I think it's a good opportunity for us to distill down how we can adapt. We're all probably master adapters here as glass artists. That's probably the thing that we've learned most over the years, is that glass making is all about problem solving and adapting in adversity. So actually, in the case of my products, and my objects, I've had to start having videos of them and having actually people touch them and squeeze them and feel them in order to give the sense of tactility for the viewer. So though they can't feel it themselves, at least they can maybe start to understand what the relation to the human is with it. And I see a few on our exhibitions, like Cluster Crafts, who were meant to have an exhibition now and have went online, have asked their artists to start to document their objects and maybe scan them in so that you can get a 3D version of it. I know it's never going to be the same as an in-person experience of it, but sadly, I think we just have to make the best of the situation and learn to upskill in other areas, such as how do we communicate digitally about our work, and it makes it more accessible for the international audience anyways.
Yeah, I think as sculptors we do have a certain disadvantage. I see people, they can't go on vacation, so they're buying something else for the house, buying a painting, buying this, and those things are of course easier to be seen online, to see what image you're buying, and maybe doing that instead of going to Greece. So I think in some ways, two-dimensional artists have a certain advantage there.
Yeah, I think it's true. Yeah, I was just also thinking about, Linda, I don't know, about the new methods and the part that Bert asked us, like the importance of the photography, the importance of the video, the moving images, and so on. The students, for example, in my place, really wants to work with their hands and now need to react on that. So the three-dimensional part is getting really important. I don't know, Linda, or you have some colleagues, friends that you can tell us about, like how they feel about that part. The less material and teaching and adapting on other parts to make art, but how do they really feel about it?
I think there is something, there is this lack of like touching things and making things. But I mean, when you're in your studio, you're also somehow isolated. So if you do sculptures, you can also pretty much do them in isolation. So I think the sharing part is maybe the thing that we have to then switch to digital. I don't know, I'm super fascinated about the new media, how you can also like render sculptures digitally, go through exhibitions digitally, and it's actually completely different experience, I have to say. You cannot really compare it. It's maybe like a new way to perceive an exhibition, and also to go back to that question, if we could still bring aspects from the pandemic, like the stuff that changed because of the pandemic after, and how we should maybe learn from it, is that I think it's a good thing to like document and share as much as we can digitally, and also, yeah, I didn't have so many people like sharing, I have to say, but I think there is a lot of opportunities with going like internationally and through the digital. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm curious, or some people have some more questions for you. You guys, then maybe they can put it in the chat box. Otherwise, I think we maybe can end up here more or less. I look to you guys, Jesse, Laura, Linda.
Yeah, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll just put in the link in the chat box where to find the.
I think you did already.
Oh, for the videos of like the home tutorials.
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay. If anybody wants to have a go, if we all end up going into lockdown again.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, we will put more information that was on this talk, on the website of the Glassfires. So again, you can go to the website and find there some more information. I thank you, Jesse. I thank you, Linda and Laura. I thank all the people who appears here and listen to us. Next month, last Wednesday, again, we will have it, the topic will be culture of inclusivity. So I think we all welcome you there again. So thank you.
Thank you. And to all the organizers, thank you for inviting me as well. And look forward to the next one.